Time for my hot afternoon break. Middle of that heat wave, still cooking. And I got a lot of emails to share. And I got a couple other topics that usually I don't try to stay away from. They're just not that priority. But I'll tell you what, when you're dealing with, potentially thousands of people like we are here in this channel and many other ones, and you watch people's reactions to what people say or want to talk about, and you gotta help but wonder, who taught so many people to react with rage when they hear someone having a different point of view of different topics, reacting with rage and wanting to absolutely demean and belittle the person who might have said something that they don't want them to say. Instead of what they used to do back in the old school days of listen to somebody else speak, think to yourself, well, I don't really agree with that, here's what I think, and then deliver your knowledge, and then come together and help make sense of something, right? It's like the other day when I mentioned about getting a needle, a forced needle. I don't give a shit what is in any syringe or any needle. If a government forces it upon you, it's just my opinion, doesn't mean I'm right or wrong, but the way I strongly feel about that is, I don't care who it is, if somebody is going to force a needle into my body that is worthy of fight or flight, fight to the death, that's worthy of going to war over, as far as I'm concerned. But if somebody has to talk about it, somebody has to tell me about the facts, the honest facts, and I get to canvas and hear from every single professional I can, so that I can come to a very responsible choice for myself, then that's great. But if somebody's in a crowd's gonna ask me, hey man, are you gonna go get that needle? No, I'm not into it. Well, and if you are one of those people who react with wanting to absolutely attack and say, shame on you, shame on this, and blow a frickin' emotional gasket, you need to get yourself checked in. You need to get yourself evaluated and checked in. You cannot think rationally. You shouldn't even be in a public group until you can get your shit together between your ears. All right? You're not being a productive member of community, period. We all count. Everything we see, know, hear, learn counts, and what we learn or what we want to learn about, we're allowed to talk about with each other. Got it? If you disagree with those words, this is definitely not the place for you at all. And I'm going to give you an example of how my stance is on some of these topics on that topic. All right, well, I got you here just for a minute because I'm not scared to talk about it, and I'm not scared to tell people my stance on any topic. I'm not scared. I'm not scared of you. I'm not scared of anyone. You can act all offended all you want to counsel me, shut my mouth. You don't scare me. You'll never be able to stop me. Right? That's my attitude. So you either sit down at this round table of knowledge with the door open to the public, where everybody's treated with respect. You sit in there, you pull up your grown-up pants, and you sit there and you listen politely. And you wait for your turn to talk, and then you talk politely. All right? You take your emotional reaction bullshit and get the F out of here and leave. Delete my channel, block this shit out of it, and never come back. All right? That's how I feel about this. Yeah, I'm a little pissed right now. We received a little bit of flack, not that the flack doesn't really have an effect on me, but when it comes to topics like these, when somebody tries to make me stop talking, I don't care what it's about, I want to punch them in the mouth. I'm being honest. I'm not tiptoeing around. I'm not scared to say it publicly. That's how you make me feel. Am I going to act on it? Of course I'm not. It's just a regular guy's way of describing his feelings, all right? Anyway, backpedal a handful of days ago, had some guests on the boat, very nice people. Very successful people, educated people. One of the couple is a medical professional from Vancouver, right? For me, right on. Cool. I have a medical professional on my boat. I can safely, they've already seen who I am. I'm not a threat. I can discuss any topic you could throw at me without judgment and safely, and I won't judge you, and I won't hammer on you if you think differently than I do. What I'm getting at is what I told this medical professional before I eased into the topic was, I said, you know, I don't fall in line. I don't have it in me to fall in line. I want to learn everything I can. I want the honest truth, and I want to listen to every single person that I can find who's qualified to talk about a topic so that I can make a responsible decision for myself, no matter what the topic is, right? I don't fall in line. Just because one person says I must do this, it's not good enough. I need to look into it. I need to learn about it. I need to know everything about it. And what I explained to this medical professional was, I go, hey, now I got you here, you know, and I explained that to her, that I don't fall in line. I need to find out. I need to talk to medical professionals like her and others as much as I can. And I explained to her, I said, you know, it's really tough these days to find good, true, honest knowledge. Where do you find it? The people that we're supposed to trust, the people we elect to be in positions to represent us, backfired on us, and that field is dominated by sleazy, opportunistic dirtbags. Easily proven. We don't have to go into it. It's easily proven, obviously. So, and they unfortunately now hold control of what we're allowed to talk about or not talk about, what we're allowed to know and not know. Now they are in control of that, mostly. Except when you come across an asshole like me who persists in speaking freely, not only myself, but many others. Anyway, I explained to her how difficult it is today to find a safe place to discuss various topics and find the absolute, true, honest facts of various topics. It's very difficult today. If you are one of those people who don't fall in line, if you're one of those people who needs the facts, needs the honest facts, it's very difficult to find them today. Prove me wrong. So I went on to explain to her that across, and she's just looking at me, listening to me like, zero input so far. So I said, when we're talking about the COVID thing, I said the one person our political group has put in place to be the one person to talk to the screen, to talk to the population of British Columbia, is this one woman in medical professional in Vancouver. And I said to her, I said, well, just, you know, just for me, as soon as I see somebody act a little insane or not so cool, as a simpler form, my red flags go off. So this one particular medical professional said publicly, if you're forced to date this at this time, at these times, if you're forced to date and you're single, make sure you bring a sheet with you, and then just put a sheet between you and your partner and cut a hole in it if you're going to have sex. She said that the person that we're all supposed to look at for the answer and for the guidance said that publicly in front of the camera. Now for me, she just went out the door for me. I can't listen to that person now and take anything out of her with too much confidence myself, just because of that. If that person was willing to and capable of making that statement on public television, and she's dead serious and it's not a Saturday Night Live skit, that person's off the team for me when it comes to me looking for honest knowledge. And there's a bit of a giggle on the boat, and everybody giggled. And then I went on to say that I have come across over a dozen, easily over a dozen now, it's much more than that if you went globally, but just North America, I found over a dozen medical professionals who are voicing their knowledge and their facts when it comes to the COVID pandemic and the vaccine shots. And it's not a pretty picture. And the majority of these medical professionals are getting their careers ruined, and the mainstream media is trying to silence them. So for me, when I'm looking for honest to God knowledge, there's some huge red flags there. A, if somebody is a misleading psychopath, maniac, you want them to speak freely, do you not? Because they will sewer themselves. If somebody isn't a threat, if they're more of an absolute embarrassing example, a complete dumbass who doesn't make any sense at all, you probably want them to talk. You want them to talk. You want them to expose themselves to the population. You want to make sure they sewer themselves and show themselves clearly as misleading and not so good to hear from, right? So for me, if I use my common sense, when I see that people are trying to silence people from not speaking, that's a big red flag for me. And I was explaining that to the medical professional. And I said, so I do know that medical professionals, doctors, aren't going to get up in the morning and decide to speak against various methods to prevent COVID-19. I'm pretty sure they're not going to offer up their entire career, their income, their mortgage payment, their family's revenue, their survival. Just get up one morning and decide to annihilate it in favor of the people and speak openly and freely about the facts they know firsthand about the COVID pandemic and about the vaccinations. Why would they do that? Right? I'm not just going to jump on board and blow a gasket with those medical professionals who really need to get a message out to the people, but they're being stopped, prevented. I'm not just going to jump on the bandwagon and annihilate those people, because what do I know? I don't know shit. But how am I going to find out shit? How am I going to find out the honest to God truth? It's a very, very confusing time. It's a very confusing time, especially if you do not fall in line, especially if you think for yourself. Well, I know there's probably a handful of you out there right now who are emotionally reacting with, my so-and-so, my cousin died from COVID, my dad died from COVID, my mom died from COVID. No shit. Many people have died from COVID. Many people have died from the flu. Thousands of people have died from the common flu. We don't hear about those people anymore, right? We can go on and on in different, obviously we can go on and start bantering about various aspects, various directions of the COVID pandemic, how people are reacting. But something isn't sitting right. That's all I'm saying. Something isn't sitting right with me. I don't feel good about it, and I want to learn more before I make a decision which affects my health, my future possibly, okay? And what's not fair about that? Why am I not allowed to talk about that? Why am I not allowed to speak openly online and tell everybody, you know what, I'm not feeling too cool about getting a needle in my body just yet. I'm not too cool about that. I want to know more. I want to hear from both sides of the coin. I want to hear it all. I want to learn every single bit of knowledge I can learn about when it comes to jamming a needle in my body. Now, how many of you people out there are blowing a gasket about that? How many of you people out there are absolutely going out of your mind because I just said that publicly? Right? Too many. One's too many. We are all apparently, supposedly, living in a free world where we can make choice, with free choice, right? Our choices are steadily being taken away from us across the board on various topics. Various aspects of life, our choices are rapidly being taken away. That's all there is to it. But anyways, what this babble comes down to is, I'm really curious about who and when started the trend of people blowing in a gasket and trying to silence people and shut them up and reacting absolutely emotionally violent emotions, anger and rage, before they actually decide to engage somebody in responsible conversation and speak openly. What happened to that? Who started that trend? Who is it? Who's guilty of that shit? I don't understand it. I seriously don't understand. It's very confusing. It happens a lot. You can see it on this channel if you look at the comment section below. I'm sure you're going to come across people just blowing a snap sandwich and blowing a freaking gasket and just coming out slinging dog shit words instead of maintaining a rational thought pattern and engaging people in good conversation, good educational conversation. What's happened? What's going on? Anyway, that's my rant of the day, and I'm going to get on with sharing some emails because people's words are important and people need a voice, and this is the place where you can have a voice and speak. All right? I hope I made sense with that one. Obviously, I'm a little beat, a little tired. No big deal. When aren't I, right? But anyways, listen to this. I guess in the end of that little rant is, I just hope that the people that come to this channel and react emotionally when it comes to certain topics, just please unwedge your head from your greasy butthole and join the rational, independent thinking people and engage in conversation and learn and help other people learn. All right? You get a grip of your emotions. Okay? All right, listen to this one. This is, we are very fortunate. I found this reply to an email we just shared recently with one hell of an experience in Alaska. We got a reply from Fred Rule. You read my experience on the upload today. That trip was to go gold panning and potentially stake a claim. Anyways, we're on a tributary of the Nushagak River called the Nuyukuk River, just below Harris Creek. I was told in New Stuyayok by a cousin that there was a huge black bear spotted up there. I was eager to get me a nice rug, but we got to the Weir salmon counting tower on the Nuyukuk River. Alaska Department of Fish and Game built a little cabin next to the tower. We unloaded the skiff and were making use of the empty shack. The Fish and Game personnel were done for the season. I had my cousin run me back downriver to a slough I saw that looked promising. We were on step. When we cut up the slough, the water level was low. There's a high bank on our left and a tree line on our right side about 30 yards from the low bank. I saw a big black dot on the far end of the slough right in front of us. I was extremely excited at the size because I was looking for a big black bear. I brought the scope of the 30-06 to my eye and it was on 3-power magnification. I rushed and shot at center mass. When the 180-grain core-locked soft-tip hollow point hit, this creature immediately screamed and stood up and ran over the bank to our left out of sight. This insanely loud screaming continued as it ran off. My cousin immediately started yelling to help him turn the skiff around. We're almost high and dry because the slough was so low. We had to lift the bow and rock it up and down to shimmy it around. We just started that process when the tree line that was on our right side initially came alive with god-awful demonic-like screams and growls. And that's when the rock started being thrown at us. It was motivation to turn the skiff around, that's for sure. My cousin was trying to idle without sucking up mud and gravel into the outboard jet. I started shooting trees along the tree line. Everything inside me was screaming, no effing way this is happening. I was shooting at the trees in an attempt to keep one of the creatures from attacking us during our idle back to the river. I emptied the rifle and pulled the .44 mag out of my shoulder holster and had it ready. We cleared the slough and that's where you picked up the experience in the upload today. I saw 4 individual faces looking in the windows at different times. The face of the first one to look in was ash gray skin tone with a large nose, human-like. The hair was black and reddish-brown tips to the hair. I know this because it was less than 2 feet away, looking me in the eyes. That's when I realized how bad I effed up. Looking at it move away from in front of the window and another larger one took its place. My uncle I spoke of just continued tending the dinner he was cooking, and this thing was literally pounding the shack to the point I thought it would collapse. It is only constructed with 5/8 plywood and 2x4s. Looking back, I think my uncle was in shock to the point of denial. And my cousin was useless once we got back to the shack. Anyways, the second one looking in had a very big head and shoulders and was similar to the first with the skin tone, but was way more robust. Steve, there was the big one and he was the biggest of the bunch. Cartoon big, Steve. This thing was at least 13 to 14 feet tall. Looked like a huge tree trunk, legs and arms. The arms were definitely longer than ours. The eyes were amber in color and bright. During the ordeal, I kept thinking, why haven't they ripped me out of the shack and beat me against a tree or ripped me apart? Even now, my heart rate is elevated just thinking about it. I keep getting thoughts about running outside, and at that point, I wasn't going anywhere. I realized then how dangerous they can be by putting thoughts like that into someone's mind. What the F? Looking back, there was a cross hanging above the door, and I wondered if that kept it from crushing the shack like a little matchbox. All the faces I saw seemed to be similar outside of size difference, also no hair on the forehead and cheekbones. The pressure you spoke about feeling in an area when the hair stands on end, I felt that pressure times 10. I was getting the same idea in my head over and over to run for it, but I knew it was being projected on me. I just felt the hate. It was so intense and I was basically alone. I felt helpless, Steve. And like there are not enough gun for this situation, people who gift and yada yada, I feel are being set up, Steve. These things hate us, no doubt. I grew up in the bush and I'm First Nations Alaska. And the village we got fuel at is called Colliganic on the upper Nushagak River, Steve. People have called me a liar, Steve, but refused to go back with me so I could show them personally. I've wanted to get back upriver and face the fear I have of that area. I regret pulling the trigger on impulse. I should have turned the magnification up on the scope and got a better look before committing to the shot. but that's 20/20 hindsight, and I'll have to deal with the dreams I still have about the experience every once in a while. That experience happened in 2006 in mid-September. I am open to anyone wanting to go to the area and check it out. I have no reservations about sharing this experience. If someone looks into going there, just be prepared for the consequences, because my experience is not unique over there. Grant you I was popping shots at them when my experience started, but by no means is their aggressive behavior unnoticed by others. The villagers of Koliganek were dealing with an aggressive hairy man all day, staying indoors and only going outside while armed in very short periods of time. When a village elder tells you to arm yourself, you better pay attention to what's really happening. I'll quit rambling on. Thanks again for the platform, Steve. I'm sure some will think it's an outlandish story. I couldn't care less what people think of me, Steve. I stand by everything I said and sincerely appreciate your approach to the topic. The experience I shared is the most extreme one I experienced in many. God bless, Steve, and keep your powder dry, brother. Blessings from Alaska. Holy shit, Fred. You know, I absolutely love Alaska myself, and I like to get up there whenever I get a chance to go, and I don't know when I would be able to pull it off, but I'll tell you what, if I can, I will come up there and I'll go there with you. How's that sound? I'm in. I think I would be absolutely interested in going up there and checking that out. What the hell, especially if you haven't been back since and you want to go. If you want to go and you were there firsthand, I'll go with you. I just got to figure out when I could pull that off, because I actually have some trail cameras up in the mountains in Alaska. I got to go hike in and fly up and hike in and go grab here one of these days, and that would be a good combo to go possibly meet up with you and go up there and we'll go on an adventure and film the whole thing and see what happens. Why not? Although it would be freaking terrifying, right? Possibly, maybe, but it doesn't sound like anybody got killed. Like, it doesn't sound like anybody from that village you talked about. You didn't mention anybody getting killed. You guys didn't get killed, so that's what possibly gives me a little more confidence to jump in on that adventure and go check it out, maybe. I don't know. It sounds interesting. Yeah, I think I would go. My gut's telling me to go anyway. I'm gonna go with it. So we'll see what happens. All right, here we go. Let's get into this with another one right away. Shit, I gotta get back to doing Oklahoma 2012. Dear Steve, thanks for the excellent work you're doing helping the people's stories be told. I've been a fan of both your channels and love hearing other people's stories and all your hunting adventures. Now to the story. It was rifle deer season in Oklahoma, specifically the Stillwater Creek area west of Highway 86. I don't want to get more specific than that because it wasn't my land. My buddy from high school had about a half a section, 320 acres, kitty-cornered each other. We always hunted a hill between these patches of trees that lead down to a few wheat fields. Well, one day, my buddy and I were sitting out on the hill and we saw a few does, nothing very exciting. It was getting dark, so we both headed back to my truck. We made our way to the first field where about 6 does were still eating. We crouched down and watched them until they wandered off across the creek. We could still hear and see them, but they didn't seem to see us, so we continued our walk. When we got next to an old oil field area from one of the many oil booms, we heard something that neither of us could explain. It was almost completely dark, but we could still see the does across the creek when we both stopped dead in our tracks, stopped by one of the nastiest smells I've smelled. It smelled like a combination of rotten flesh and skunk. We stopped, and right when I said, "Hey, do you smell that?" from the tree line or behind the tank batteries came a whoop sound. It was low to high-pitched at the end. Both of us looked very confused. Then we saw the deer's reaction, and that's what alarmed me. The deer who had earlier been eating with no care in the world then, as soon as they heard that sound, they lost their shit and ran everywhere, snorting and making all kinds of noise. We briskly continued our walk back to the truck. When we got there, we both sat and discussed just what the hell that smell and noise was. Thanks to this channel, I now know what we experienced. My friend then later told me stories of how his brother's fearless little dog would fight or chase any wild animals, but in this area the dog would sometimes act terrified for no apparent reason. This experience didn't stop us from hunting there, but it always made us on our toes. We never touched our guns through this whole event. Maybe that's why it was so tame. I had a 30-06 and my buddy had a 308. Thank goodness we didn't try to use them. Thank you for all you do. My name is Nathan Nelson. I no longer live in Oklahoma, so sharing my name will be fine. I now live in the beautiful San Juan Mountains and collect 10 cords of wood each winter. For each winter. Thankfully no sightings during those adventures. My wife and her mom, when she was a kid, lived out in the Death Valley area. They're driving back at night when one of those truly deserted stretches of road when my wife says she saw a really tall, skinny, hairy man walk across the road in 3 steps, then off into the desert. A few miles later, their tire fell off because someone didn't tighten the lug nuts, and they almost crashed. They waited 4 hours for someone even to drive by to help them. Keep on pumping out the people's word. You have an army of support and good people willing to help you if you let them. Godspeed with your endeavors. Sincerely, Nathan Nelson. Nathan, I absolutely appreciate the time that you took to email me and share with everybody here. All right, man? Time's precious for every single one of us, and I really, really appreciate that. And if you come across any knowledge you think that people could benefit from, get back to me, all right, man? And be safe out there, for sure. The story I've been reluctant to tell. Hi, Steve. So I've been on the fence about sending this ever since I found your awesome channel in November 2020. Until now, I've only told one other person about this, and that is my son, as we shared an incident roughly 5 years prior in an area called Desolation Wilderness, so I knew he would understand. Please, just use my first name for this, so here goes. I was solo hiking a trail that I've hiked on several different occasions. This trail, Snow Valley Peak, takes up 5 miles before it evens out for a bit and then continues in several directions at that point and is heavily wooded for the first 4 miles. I was roughly 3.5 miles into my hike when 2 young women and a dog came blowing down the steep trail, and I'm fairly certain that they didn't even notice me as they ran by back towards the parking area. I stood there for a second, kind of shook my head, continued up the trail to do a switchback when I saw a small dog hunkered down and trembling uncontrollably, and he had soiled the ground. I couldn't believe these women would run off and leave that poor little guy who was on a leash, and that pissed me off. I bent down and gently petted the guy on the head and quickly checked to make sure he wasn't hurt. He wasn't. I felt bad for him and picked him up in my arms, and he looked up at me with the saddest, most scared eyes I can recall. That's when I noticed the most massive beast I've ever seen. I'd estimate around 7.5 feet tall and well over 500 pounds. The angriest features I've ever seen on a face was staring me right in the eyes. I simply froze and didn't know what to do. The little dog tried to push his snout deeper into my grip, and as he did, the creature closed his eyes for a second or two, and when he opened them again, he looked at me and then down at the little guy in my arms, and the anger from the creature drained from his face, and a sense of calm and peace washed over me. I looked back down at the dog, who was still shaking, when the thought popped in my head that the creature wasn't mad at me, but at the 2 women for leaving their dog. When I looked back up, the creature was gone, without as much as a sound. Weird. I stood there for a minute, wasn't sure what to do, so after 30 seconds or so, I decided to head back down the hill to see if I could find the women and reunite them with the little guy. I found them both hiding behind a huge granite boulder, crying and shaking. I explained what happened, and both women were thankful. As I was handing the pooch over, he tried to cling to me and didn't want me to let him go. I had this just overwhelming sense of peace about me. I decided to finish my hike. I kept looking around for the rest of the day, but never saw nor heard anything else out of the ordinary. This is my experience, so thanks for listening to it. Sincerely, Brian. Brian, that's one hell of a story, and you've been, quote, reluctant to tell. Well, no doubt, man. I mean, imagine you just told that to a group of random people who didn't even have a heads up it was going to be the Sasquatch topic, right? If you did not have a clue about what's going on out in the real world for real, and you heard your story, you would probably look at you like you had just done 6 hits of acid or something, right? And been laughed out of the frickin' room. Whatever. It's a hell of an experience. I wonder did you ask the women what they saw, what was making them hide? What did they see? It would be interesting to know what happened there right before you got there. Crazy. Crazy, crazy, man. It's endless. Steve, I started to follow your channel right from the beginning, and I have to say what you're doing has made a difference, and voicing the many who have shared their encounters in a forum that we all have access to is such a huge leap forward getting the truth out and spoken to all who will hear. As a fellow walker of the woods, I also send my condolences to the loss of your horse companions that understand each other is a bond to be cherished. That may be long-winded. Alright, my encounter took place in 1978. I was 16, living in Kelowna, BC. Our place was south on the east side of the lake. I love to spend time out in the mountains behind where we live. It was only a 15 to 20 minute walk to be out of town and starting to climb out into the foothills where a creek or small river in the spring ran through a canyon that meandered down through a neighborhood. As a young boy growing up, I spent a lot of time venturing out into the woods. I believe I was 8 when I took my first real hike by myself. I loved exploring the hills and mountains that continued to climb for miles behind our little community. This creek I would follow for miles, and the steep canyon walls had areas where cliffs had formed and made it difficult to climb out of. But I had found the trails and impressions of animals for better travel up and around these troubled spots. One day during the summer, I took my brother and sister and a girlfriend for a little walk up past the falls, which are about 2 miles from our house. This particular day was beautiful, bright and sunny, clear blue skies. It was just a perfect day to be out exploring. We had gone about a quarter of a mile up the creek, and we came around a corner to find a stretch of bedrock about 100 feet long that was exposed from the water, carving and running over it for many years. And as we walked along, I saw a sandbar about 6 feet long, and the creek was running along one side of this sand. And in the middle of this stretch of sand, I could see a footprint. There's no periods, and it's gonna suck the life out of me. As I crouched down, it became clear to me that someone had made this track. My sister came over to see what I was intensely looking at and said, "Hey, you made a nice track." And then realized I was still wearing my tennis shoes. I took my foot and hovered over this print and found it was bigger than my size 12 running shoe in length and width. Then I realized there was only one footprint made. The bedrock in the creek was very pronounced, and the sandbar was about 6 feet long, between 2 stretches of bare rock, about 10 to 20 feet long each. So who or what made this footprint had to walk from one piece of bare rock, step on the sand, and then step onto the next patch of bare rock, leaving only one track. The track was also placed about 3 inches from the water's edge in the creek. I remember this as clearly today as if I was standing there when it happened. As I looked at this footprint in the sand, I could describe it as perfect human bare footprint with 5 toes and a heel and an arch. And that the depth of it was 2 to 3 inches down and close to the water's edge. I wanted to see if I could make the same impression. So I stepped back about a foot along the same line as the imprint. I jumped up and down to see how soft the sand was. My first attempt at making a track, jumping on 1 foot, was about ½ an inch deep. So I kept jumping up and down 6 times more before I got down to the same level as this track I had found. I knew that whatever had made the track had to be heavy to make that deep a track. As I looked at our tracks, I saw water from the stream was just now flowing into both our footprints. I started to get that feeling of something is watching us. Thoughts raced through my mind like lightning. What could make a track like that? Who could be out here? A trapper, an old hermit? No, something bigger than your average man. Something who was out here and is watching us right now. The hair on the back of my neck stood up, and I realized how stupid I'd been for not bringing a gun with me, but then also felt that a gun would do me no good even if I had one. So I called quietly to everyone to come over to where I was, and I told them it was time to go home. The reaction I got from my 3 companions was, "What? We just got to the good part. Let's keep going." I didn't want to alarm them or whomever was out there watching us. I just knew it was time to go. That track had just been made a minute or less before I made mine, and I knew right then that I had to get my little group out of there now. So I guided everyone out of the creek bed, made a way to the trail I knew of that would get us out of the area quickly and down up the mountain another way. I remember them asking me why I was so jumpy and nervous, but I didn't answer till we had gone a mile or so down the trail. I said it's probably a bear or cougar that was watching us. And my brother and sister looked at me and said, "Who made that footprint?" I didn't answer them, but we knew what it could have been. We just didn't want to say it. Second incident. About 3 or 4 months later in that same year, I went out in the afternoon to get some firewood and also to just explore a little up the canyon. I was walking up the same creek about a mile down from the falls where the canyon comes to an end and spreads out to the right like a delta does on a river. At this point of the canyon, the walls were very steep and close together like a 60-degree angle on both sides. Pine tree and aspen and birch grew along the water's edge, along with some big cottonwood trees. I chose the tree to cut down right next to the water's edge, which was about the base of the canyon wall. This section of terrain was fairly level, and the creek was flowing about 12 to 18 inches deep in a stretch of about 100 feet long by 25 feet across, with rocks about the size of bowling balls laid out side by side, so the water was pretty level and loud as it rushed by. The weather was getting down to freezing at night, but during the day it was still warming up in the high 30s, low 40s. I had my winter coat on with a couple extra shirts. As I started working on this tree, which is about 3 inches across, I was warming up, so I took off my coat and shirts and continued chopping on my tree. I was using a double bit axe. About 10 to 15 minutes into my work, I had a sense of someone looking at me. I stopped and looked around, but I couldn't see anything as I was down in the bottom of the creek bed with the rush of water and a little wind in the trees. But that feeling of eyes on me was constant. I just passed off as a cougar or bear, which would leave you alone for the most part. I spent 45 minutes chopping on this big tree, watching the chips fly, and working up a good sweat too. While I was working, I couldn't shake the sense of something on the other side of the creek watching me, but I couldn't see anything. There was a cliff face about 20 feet high right across from me, so my vision was blocked a bit from the undergrowth and trees that were there. I finally felled this 80-foot plus tree. I yelled as the tree fell. I was so proud of myself for having it land right where I planned it to fall, right next to the creek's edge, but not in the water. I jumped up on top of the log and started limbing it. A few seconds later, I heard a noise across the creek, up on top of the cliff face. I could see movement, but nothing real distinct. What I did see was this tree about 12 inches thick and maybe 25 to 30 feet tall start to sway back and forth like someone was pulling and pushing it. And then it came crashing down over the edge and into the creek, just like someone would do if you could push over a tree. I got this distinct impression this was done for my sake, for me to see, like it was saying, look at what I can do, just like you. That thought was put in my mind, not by me. I was stunned, trying to process all this information of what was happening in less than 5 seconds. Then I heard what you would hear of someone running on hard, packed surface and their bare feet, slapping the ground as they ran. I don't know if the sound was going up or down or coming right at me. A feeling of dread and then fear came over me so powerful I was frozen in place, stopping me from moving. But I knew I needed to run. I forced myself to move and I jumped down to grab my coat and shirts that were in a pile with one hand and holding my axe in the other. I ran up the canyon wall on my side and I didn't stop till I got to the top, which is about 200 yards. Running that hard and that fast, I was all in when I reached the top. I looked across to the other side, which is only about 150 feet. I could not hear or see anything, but was frightened with that feeling of not knowing I was being chased or not. As I stood there panting for breath, I put my shirts and coat back on and I realized I'd left my knife and hat back down at the bottom of the creek. I debated for a second of going back down to get them and told myself, hell no. I headed home along the edge of the canyon until I got to the sands pit, then climbed down that and walked back home. It was already getting dark and my walk home was a quick one. The next day, I asked a buddy of mine to come with me to retrieve my knife and hat and take a look around. As we stood where I had felled my tree, I showed him what I had done, and then he pointed to the tree that had been pushed down from the edge of the cliff. He said, I bet it was a bear that pushed it over. I said, come on, let's take a look and see what it was that knocked over that tree. Should be tracks up there. I hopped across the creek on the rocks sticking up out of the water, climbed the other bank cliff, and walked over to the base of the tree that was uprooted. All found was a bare patch of dirt, a circle about 3 feet across that was pounded flat like something had been standing there stomping the ground, long enough to remove all vegetation and leave black dirt exposed. No tracks, nothing but earth, stomped smooth and flat and fresh like you would a garden spot, which is very apparent that was standing here had been so for a while, watching me work the day before. I asked my friend if he could tell me what he saw. He said maybe a bear did this. So I asked him to show me the bear tracks. All we could see was fresh packed earth with no claw marks or indication of a track of any kind. And the tree had no signs or scratches or claw marks on the tree, on the trunk of the tree either. I looked around up the slope up the canyon wall to see tracks of what looked like someone running uphill. These tracks were made in soft pine needles, about 8 to 12 inches deep. The trail was going uphill, not down, and the space between these deep impressions was 6 to 7 feet of something running on 2 legs, going uphill. We followed them up to the top, keeping to one side as not to disturb the trail. The trail led us to a bench area with a thick forest, and after a few hundred yards, the trees got more dense and dark, even though the sun was up with the clear blue skies overhead. We stopped because the trees were growing smaller and tighter together, making a wall that you could not penetrate. And that feeling of being in a place you should not be in came over us. Kind of like you would get walking up to the mouth of a cave that you know a bear is in, and you don't know if he is home or not, but you can smell him. So we decided right then to head back. As we went down the slope, we could see the trail back to the creek bottom. I had to jump from one track to the next to match the distance between the footprints of this creature. In my mind, I knew no human could have made these tracks. My friend and I are both over 6 feet tall. Both of us were athletic and have played all kinds of sports at school, and were on the track team, pretty much done growing in height. And we had a hard time matching its stride going downhill while it was going up. Two-legged creature running uphill in a very steep sided canyon wall, about 60 to 65 degree angle. I think my friend became a believer at that moment. No bear runs on 2 legs or can spread his legs to match a stride 6-7 feet, let alone running up a steep hill. We had to jump down the hill to match the stride of this creature. I wished for a definite track so we could cast one, but there was no way you could. The prints were like deep impressions and thick pine needles, but very defined and nothing like I had ever seen before. I followed deer, elk, foxes, bears, black and brown and white, muskox, caribou, moose, cougars, coyotes, wolves, and everything else you could track or hunt in the woods, and nothing I knew could make these tracks, especially where we found them. I'm 6'2", and as a youth, I was very much involved with cross-country running. Also been on the track team and most other sports that the high school provided. I'm no slouch when it comes to walking and running in the mountains of the woods. We were extending ourselves to make a 3-foot stride up this side of this canyon wall in deep pine needles. As I look back on this, I remember that this particular part of the canyon wall had no game trails or any movement due to the steepness of the terrain and difficulty of walking in this area of the mountain. Whew. Okay, Robert, listen, I read the rest of your email to me as though you did write it to me, and it's a long one, all right? And the rest of your story was conversation between me, and I appreciate your words and I appreciate you sending it in. But I had to cut it short because we need to share the experiences with the people here online, okay, buddy? And sometimes a lot of people, they're getting it all out there, they're excited to share with me, and I appreciate every word you sent here too. But I gotta save the video time online for the experiences to get them out and get them shared with everybody so they can learn from those experiences, okay, man? But I read the rest of your email to me, and I appreciate everything you sent. If you come across any other knowledge you think you can help people with here, please send it, okay, my man? And I appreciate your share. I appreciate it big time. Titled, "It Was in the Tree." Hello, Steve. Hope you're well. Big fan of yours. Withhold my name, please. I'm in Kamloops, but lived all over BC coastal area. Finally got enough balls to write you about my encounter with the Sasquatch when I was just a kid up near Alaska. You can imagine the wildlife up there, Steve. So awesome. When I was 9-10 years old, I lived in the border town of Stewart, BC, 3 kilometers from the Alaska border. Our friends and I were playing around a swampy area behind our rows of townhouses on the outer end of town along a bush line of the forest. One day back in 74, 75, we built this flimsy raft in this tiny swamp. We previously used all our nails up for our cool 2-story tree fort built nearby. So we used a rope instead to tie together a long, thin logs as we proceeded to paddle around some in this small swamp. The raft started to come apart. So my friends and I, to which I remember the names for 2 of those friends, ran fast to the end of the raft to jump to shore. We landed on the muddy shoreline. I hear this terrible roar or scream. I turn to my left to see this huge black animal. Not sure the weight or actual size. Bear size, I would guess. It was hunched over on a branch of a large tree. It was hulking in stature with big white teeth, screaming bloody murder at us. My heart is pounding now just thinking about this animal in this tree screaming like a banshee. We ran so fast out of there, my feet barely touching the ground. It was not a bear. I know that for sure. We ran into black bears and grizzlies often in Stewart as we played around the whole town and mountainous area of British Columbia. I never talked about it to my brothers or sisters. They would have laughed and thought we were full of it. We knew if we went home to our parents about any of our bear sightings, wolves, etc., many other larger creatures up there we would run into on a daily basis as kids, we'd never be allowed out if my parents only knew what we were up to, LOL. My life up in Stewart was always adventurous, like Huckleberry Finn. So many things we did without parents watching all the time. I feel sorry for kids nowadays. Thank you, Steve. I can't tell you how much the weight has been lifted off of me. These guys' names are Kenny and Kevin McDonald if they ever get a hold of you. I had to move suddenly from family illness. Wow. Okay, man, I don't believe I did read your name. It says to withhold your name and you wrote it in here twice. But thank you so much for sharing that. Appreciate it. You imagine how many kids have seen these things and they're too scared shitless to share with the family or tell anyone? Which is so freaking wrong, it's ridiculous. You know, when you see something that scares the living shit out of you, you see something that is absolutely amazing, or can even potentially change society as we know it, and your family is not a safe place to share it. Isn't that sad? I wonder how many families out there watching this channel right now are actually not a safe place for their family members to share shit. Isn't that a sad thought? But it sadly is true. It's commonly true. But anyway, I gotta get going again. And take note, one more time in case you missed it, in the beginning of this video, what I'm getting at is we all deserve the right to speak about topics openly with each other. No matter what our stance on the topic is, we deserve and own the right to speak about it. If I or you want to gain more knowledge about a certain topic, especially when it comes to health, we deserve every bit of right to look into as many different avenues of knowledge as we can to find out the honest to God truth for ourselves. Nobody is in the position to dictate to us what is or isn't when it comes to facts, right? We've got to learn on our own. We've got to look into it and learn on our own, especially when it comes to our own health. What's wrong with saying that? What's wrong with that, right? You imagine what I just said this last minute, if it makes you angry, just how frickin' messed up you gotta be, right? People. Anyway, back at it. I'll be back with way more shares, way more words and facts from way more people shortly. And I cannot wait to dive into my inbox and find more knowledge from the people, man. It's funny, after leaving my inbox alone for a couple weeks, this is probably one of the first times I actually realized, holy shit, I get excited every time I crack open my inbox to see what knowledge is sitting there for all of us from the people, right? It's a damn good thing.